All right. So it is 7. We will go ahead and kick off the June meeting of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission. My name is Marissa Hartzler. I am the vice chair. The real chair is sitting next to me. He's going to keep me in line, I'm sure. But he gets to be understandably jet lagged, so we'll go easy on him. All right, we have a very ambitious agenda for this evening. So we'll go ahead and get it kicked off. We definitely have quorum here. So I think we'll go around. We can start on our left with Nathan and just do introductions. And please remember to enable the microphone. We'll need to share them and just hit that on-off button.
All right. Hello, I am Nathan Lee. I am the Duke liaison for BPAC, and I am also the committee chair for PI, and I've been on BPAC since last June.
I'm Mary Rose Fontana. I am the county bicycle representative for BPAC. I participate in PI, and I'm also the Vision Zero liaison.
Andre Sotero, youth representative for the county. I've been on BPAC since June of last year, July of last year. And I am involved with the EEE subcommittee.
Chris Perlstein, transportation planning policy for the city. And I have only been here for 3 meetings, and I'm also taking over for as secretary starting today. So see how that goes.
Good evening, Brian Hawkins. I've been on BPAC for a little over 1.5 years. I am an at-large member for the city, and I am the chair of the commission for this year, but gratefully yielding that responsibility to Marissa tonight.
Again, I'm Marissa. I've been on BPAC for just about 1 year now, and I primarily participate in development review, DevRev, and I am the Greenway city appointee.
Sure. Hi, good evening, Suzanne Schmall. I've been part of BPAC now, I think, since 2018. Previous chair and previous EEE chair, and now just a lowly little member.
Evening, I'm Royal. I represent the Fayetteville Street Quarter as well as North Carolina Central University.
Yep. Hi, Scott Carter. I've been on BPAC about 1.5 years, I think, and I'm the chair of the Development Review Committee.
Hi, I'm Tony Reedy. This is my first meeting. In fact, I haven't been sworn in yet. And staff correct me if I'm wrong. I think I'm an at-large member from the county.
Jeff Bukowczyk, this is my second stint on BPAC. I was on BPAC from 2013 to 2016. Rejoined last year, and I'm a city at-large representative.
Hi, I'm Hannah Salvaggio, and I'm the staff liaison for BPAC.
And we have our guest presenter tonight.
Good evening. I'm Sharon Williams. I'm the director of the Department of Equity and Inclusion for the city of Durham.
Thank you for being here. Okay, so excused absences, Hannah, for this evening for the minutes. So Landon Baufom and Heidi. Thank you so much. And any updates? Well, hold on. Let's start here. Let's go in order. Would anybody volunteer to please read the equity and land acknowledgement this evening? It is in your.
I can do it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brian.
I think. We, as the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, want to begin this meeting by affirming BPAC's commitment to equity and racial justice. We would like to acknowledge that this meeting is being held on lands that have served as the home for diverse Indigenous communities long before the current governments were established here. We pay our respect to the elders and members of these communities, both past and present, and recognize the harms of genocide and colonialism. We will make a conscious effort to reflect on the following questions as we advance through our business and contemplate changes in our community. And we recognize that achieving equity requires our commitment to an ongoing process. How can we seek to repair harm and work to not erase history? How does our work impact the vulnerability and safety of people who hold many intersecting marginalized identities, including Black, Indigenous, and people of color, people with disabilities, and lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning people? How can we prioritize and center people in our decision-making? How can we be more responsive to local needs? How can our work build community power and shared decision-making?
All right. Hannah, can we turn it to you for an update on new members and openings?
Sure. So in your packet that says membership updates, I printed these off so it was a little easier to follow along. But the new member that we have today, as Tony has already introduced himself, but it's Tony, and he's representing the county at large position. And then we have two members that are cycling off. Suzanne, this is your last meeting. And then Mike Shepard. So thank you so much for your leadership and staying on and dedication to bike and pedestrian issues. Okay, and so for vacancies and application statuses, so the city, we have two applications or three actually openings. So July 3rd is the application deadline for the walking, running, pedestrian community for marginalized groups and youth. That position was actually Tony had applied to that one and then the at-large, and so it's being re-advertised. So let people know about that. And then the other two applications that have July 10th deadline is public transit and paratransit. That's actually Adil's position, and she is not eligible to do another round, so we're going to have to find a new person. And then there's the youth representative role. And again, that's someone needs to be 16 to 24 for that. And then on the county, we have a position for senior advocacy, and that's June 30th, the deadline. And then good news is we have a couple applicants for two positions that were vacant. So the youth children advocacy, which is Suzanne's, we have someone that had applied to that, and then also the at-large. And so the next commissioner meeting will they'll be voting on those two positions. So hopefully we have two new members joining us soon.
Quick question. When does Ideal cycle off?
Just saw, it's actually August 30th. So we're gonna have to figure out for Triple E, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Thank you, Hannah, for that. Thanks for all your work shepherding these vacancies and appointments and things. And certainly everybody share with your contacts if you think anybody would be interested in serving. All right. Moving on, are there any adjustments to the agenda that you have shared in advance and everybody has a printed copy this evening? Any adjustments? All right. Hearing none, then let's move on to the approval of the minutes from the May meeting. Does anybody have any adjustments to those minutes? They are not printed. Hannah, are you able to share them? Okay.
They've already been shared via email. So I guess if there are any adjustments needed, hopefully everyone's seen them.
Gotcha.
Want to like verbally go through them right now, or?
No, I don't think that's necessary. Yeah.
I move that we approve the minutes from the May meeting as written.
All right. Any other discussion? Yeah. All right. How do you all vote? Those in favor adopting the minutes?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? All right. Thank you much. All right, next up is public comment, up to 3 minutes per speaker. We do not have anyone from the public here in attendance, yes? We do have one on Zoom. So Robin, any public comment this evening?
No, none for me. I'm actually with the City of Durham Transportation Department.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. Okay, so we will move on from that and go ahead and invite Sharon to give our racial equity training this evening.
All right.
Thank you so much, Sharon.
Well, thank you. Good evening, everyone. You are the first commission that I've been before that actually did an acknowledgement. You just made my day and probably my week. So thank you very much for that. I knew that coming here, you would be one of the ones who absolutely understood equity. And again, that makes me very happy. And it was worth that quick trip to Charlotte. I was in Charlotte this morning and I'm with you this evening. So I'm very happy to be. So thank you for that. This is advancing racial equity. And we're doing this for all the boards, committees, and commissions because we want you to know what it is that we're doing and what it is that we have committed to in the city of Durham. This isn't a formal presentation, even though it's going to look like it because I have a PowerPoint. You are welcome to stop me at any time if you have questions or comments, or there's just something you want to contribute to the dialogue. I've been with the city of Durham for 9 years. I was previously the HR manager for 4 years with responsibility for onboarding, professional development, and employee relations. And I've been in my current role for the last 2 years. My role is focused on embedding equitable considerations into the fabric of the organization. What does that mean? It means it doesn't matter where you sit in this organization. If you are planting trees, you should be thinking about equity. If you are paving streets, you should be thinking about equity. If you are doing what it is that clearly you love to do, which is looking out for people that ride bicycles, and I have a motorbike, and our pedestrians, you are definitely people that are thinking about equity. That's what I do, is help to embed those considerations into everything that it is that we do. So the objectives tonight are to increase your awareness of equity, which I'm happy to say you all understand already, and that brings me joy, to talk about government's role in creating inequity, and to talk about our role in advancing equity in the city of Durham. So the agenda is kind of wrapped around what is equity and why does it matter, some of the language and the reality of equity and inequity, and to talk about our path to advancing racial equity in the city of Durham. I think this is a slide that you know the answer to very well. And on one side, you have diversity, and on the other side, inclusion. Diversity is about a whole vast array of things, as you well know. So it's about all of the things that you see and many of the things that you don't. So diversity is about the visible and also the invisible. In the city of Durham, if you look at our staff population, it very closely mirrors the population of the resident population in the city of Durham, very closely. So something I'm very proud of. Diversity is a fact. So in this organization, we have diversity, but inclusion is an act. It's an act that takes work. So my department is focused on equity and inclusion. Inclusion is making people feel valued and included and welcomed and respected and listened to and accepted. It's creating a place for everyone, and that is a priority for us in this organization, for our staff, as well as for residents of the city of Durham. So we say diversity is a fact, but inclusion is an act, and it's an act that absolutely takes work. And if you think about the work that you're doing on this commission, you know about inclusion and making people feel like you are part of something and you matter and you are as important as everyone else in this city, because we want to make Durham a place for everyone. So the question is, what about equity? Because that was diversity and that was inclusion. So while diversity is quantity, different identities and cultures, and inclusion is quality, participation across identities and cultures, equity is justice. It's policies and practices and procedures and programs that ensure equitable outcomes for everyone. So in this organization, we think about and we center equity. So what is it? Equity is when access and opportunity are the same across different groups, and race is not a predictor of outcomes. That's how we define it. And why do we define it like that? Because race today continues to be a predictor of outcomes. So while we think about equity, we actually think about equity and we center race. So that means when we look at street pavings, we want to know, where have we been paving streets? And there may be some neighborhoods that we've ignored versus others. That might be our reality. Or where have we planted trees? We need to know if we've planted trees more in some neighborhoods than others. Equity is leveling the playing field, right? And that's something that's a commitment for our organization. So you know this graphic, yes. So equity period is just leveling the playing field. We center race, which means we look at race. Why? Because race was the first differentiator. If you go back to the very history of this country, the Native Americans didn't look like everybody else, and there were actions that were taken against them. Black people didn't look like everybody else, and they were enslaved. And so while we center race, the outcomes benefit everyone. Think, for example, about our sidewalks, and you may have heard this example before. I remember when there weren't cuts in the sidewalk. Why did we do that? Remember, you know the little slits now? Why did we do that? Right? Some for walkers, some for people that had different vision issues, some with mothers that were pushing their children, right? So the fact that we center race doesn't mean that we don't think about equity across the board in everything. We just center race because many times that's the first differentiator. The fact that everything else is left out is sort of surprise, honestly. So it's everything that's under that umbrella. We just center race. So the work that we do is very much about data. And when I say center race, I can pull race-based data. I can't pull some of the other data, but the actions that we take are intended to benefit everyone. Okay, so you've seen this graphic before, likely, equality versus equity, and you surely know the difference. In equality, everyone got exactly the same thing. And you can see from that graphic, everybody doesn't need exactly the same thing. Equity is about giving people what it is that they need so that we all benefit and can be successful. So equity levels the playing field, and that creates better outcomes for everyone. So racial equity is when racial identity cannot be used to predict what's going to happen to people, individual or group life outcomes. What do I mean when I say that? Like wealth, or income, or employment, or criminal justice, or housing, or healthcare, or education. While I won't show you some of the data around those things today, all of those things right now can be predicted based on race. I can tell you that the outcomes are going to be worse for people of color in every category that you see up there. Yet another reason why we center race. And it's about improving outcomes for all. GARE is the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. If you've never heard about it, you can get information about GARE online. The city of Durham joined GARE in 2016, 2017 timeframe. And GARE is really a networking organization that brings together jurisdictions from across the country. There are 400 members now of GARE. They used to just operate with city and county entities, and they've expanded now, and they're working with state and federal entities as well. So poll, government, local, state, and federal have played a role in creating and maintaining historical inequities. Yeah, so it has. So why do we talk about this? Because it's important. And our city hasn't moved away from it because we recognize that that's a reality. We recognize that even we, the city of Durham, have caused harm, albeit unintentional. we've caused harm, right? We've been responsible for some of the inequities. And if you did it, then you're responsible for undoing it. So that's why it's our focus. So I'm going to talk for a moment about government's role in perpetuating inequities. You recognize these things. Government played a role in determining who could be a citizen, who was property, who owned property, who could vote, where you could live, who you could marry, and whether or not your military service would be honored in the same way as other people. And that's just a few of the things. Those things are explicit. So there was a role that government maintained at one point in explicit racial inequities, and then it became implicit. So that's when government started to say, well, discrimination is illegal, but everything is race neutral, and then ignored what state and local government did to still close the door on people. Think about voting. Government may have said everybody can vote, but what did they do at the state and local level? You've heard of poll taxes? Say that again. Literacy tests? Grandfather clauses? You know it. Yes. Okay. And some of it is still going on. It's being perpetuated today. And government sometimes kind of throws up their hands and says, well, we said race neutral. We said everybody should be able to do this, but we're going to ignore what's being done at the local level that is still resulting in biased decision-making. Right? So why lead with race? That's why. From infant mortality to life expectancy, race, not skill or ability, predicts how well you will do in all of those fields that you see up there and more. So it's why our city hasn't walked away from having these kinds of conversations, even though they are difficult at times to have, because they're acknowledging things that we would rather forget. But we acknowledge that the city of Durham played a role in what happened with the Haiti community. And if we played a role in that, then it's also incumbent upon us to do work that changes that reality for people that are part of that community, who are part of our Durham community. So racial inequity drivers, individual racism, institutional racism, and structural racism. Individual racism is very difficult. And there was a time in my life when I thought that that was absolutely the work I needed to do. So in 1990, I was certified as a dismantling racism facilitator. And I was going to take care of it at the individual level. And then what I realized was that at the individual level, I wasn't affecting institutional change. And institutional change was really my focus. It's changing the policies and practices and procedures that work better for white people than for people of color, unintentionally and inadvertently. So not with blame, it's just the reality. I couldn't go to school in my lifetime with people that didn't look like me. Everybody in my school, in my lifetime. So I know that there are people who want to pretend that this was years and years ago. In my lifetime, I couldn't. There are a number of things in my lifetime that happened. And so the work that we want to do in the city of Durham is at the institutional and structural level. We want to change policies and practices and procedures and programs to level the playing field. So our work is at the institutional level and at the structural level. Yes. So fantastic question. I'm glad that you asked it. Many people don't, and some that I know that are even on my work team still struggle with that. Institution are the policies and practices and procedures of our institution, for example. Let me give you an example from the city of Durham. Like many institutions, there was a point when the city of Durham had on its job application that, you know, if you were a felon, check this box. How come? Because you weren't going to get hired, right? We eliminated that box in 2014. Why? Who is disproportionately part of the criminal legal system? People of color. So as long as that box is there, white people, in this case, who were not as disproportionately affected based on their percentage of the population, could still be employed, but people of color who were disproportionately represented in the criminal legal system couldn't be. We rectified that. Because even then, when we didn't call it equity, we were thinking about equity. That's a change to an institutional policy, practice, or procedure. Why is that different than structural? Structural is when there are barriers across institutions, right? I can't get childcare because there's no childcare that's located in my community. I can't get food because there's no grocery store in my community. I live in a food desert. I can't get transportation to work because, and it keeps going. So there are different institutions and there are barriers across that. Okay. Good. Thank you so much for that question. So our work is focused on changing hearts and minds, yes, but it's centered on inequity, and equity and inclusion is focused on increasing inclusion through systematic change. So we want to change the policies and practices and procedures and programs that create barriers or that have created barriers or inequities in our communities. So now I want to talk about advancing equity in the city of Durham. And I'm going to be talking about the kinds of things that we've already established. Two things. We established a racial equity vision and mission. Our vision is for Durham to be a vibrant community in which all residents and employees thrive with power and purpose. Racial equity is an embedded principle. Shared economic prosperity is a reality, and race is not a predictor of outcomes. The vision is that thing that's out there that you're always reaching for. And it may not be achieved in my lifetime, but it is certainly what keeps me motivated every day. The day-to-day mission is why I drive to work. It's to be involved in intentionally identifying racial inequities, engaging the community, and using a collaborative approach in creating solutions to ensure race no longer stands as a determinant of outcomes and opportunities. We share this with employees that are new to the organization, and we've had meetings with all of the employees across the organization to share our vision and to share our mission. And we tell them, this is who we are as a city. This is who you've come to work for. So we want you thinking about equity. And I will tell you that I'm very proud of this organization because our people do. They do it automatically. It's part of the thought process. An example from recent history is the way we approached participatory budgeting. Everybody familiar with PB? Our participatory budgeting team, to make sure that we had representation from across our community, went to barbershops, beauty shops, grocery stores. They have surveys to fill out. Grocery stores, wherever people were. Why? Because they wanted more people of color to be involved in the process this year. And to do that, they did whatever it took to really hear the voice of our community. Centering race, because they realized that some might not have a computer or might not answer if it was just a computer survey, right? Some might not ever see the survey, but if I went to their church or if I showed up downtown at one of the festivals, I'm going to hear from more people and perhaps more that are more diverse. And that really was what they were aiming for. That's just one of the examples that I'm very proud of. What I mentioned before about centering race in our street pavings and in how we're planting trees was really a reality for the work that's been ongoing in our community. So that's our racial equity vision and our racial equity mission. And we use something called a racial equity assessment lens. This is our decision-making tool. It has 5 parts to it. When our departments are making decisions, we say, what's being considered? What's the desired result and outcome that you're looking for? And we're rooted in data. What does the data tell us about who has not been served or has not been served equitably? Have we heard the voice of the community? How have we engaged the community? What does the community want? And if we do what it is we're thinking about doing, who will benefit, who will be burdened? What are potential consequences that we didn't even think of because they're outlandish? And how can we prevent harm? Right? And then implementation and accountability is the last step. An example I would give you is from when COVID first started. There was a decision in the very early days to close City Hall. What happens on the first floor of City Hall? It's where you pay your water bill. Why can't we close City Hall? Because some people are unbanked. Some of our residents are unbanked. So if you close City Hall, where are they going to pay their bill? And if you're not thinking about equity, you don't think about that. Everybody understand the example? That's centering equity. So it doesn't matter what the decision is. We need to be thinking about leveling the playing field. And for us, it's who's being left out. Whose voices do we need to hear? If you live close to any of the parks where there's a basketball court, we had initiatives underway for a while at one of the courts because the folks that play basketball wanted it lit up at night because they wanted to play a little bit longer. We didn't necessarily engage the community at first because that was a great idea. Kept people busy off the street. There was a senior citizens residence right next door to one of those. Because they were going to leave the lights on until what? 11 o'clock. But when we engaged the residents said, what? Oh, no. So we had to come to some agreement about what would benefit everyone. So we center equity. We think about leveling the playing field, and it doesn't matter what we're doing. That's what it means to embed equitable considerations into the fabric of the organization. So that's just a couple of examples. I think it was either 9 o'clock or 10. I think it was 9, but they did come to agreement on that. I wanted to share some of the things that we've done already in the city of Durham. From an employment perspective, we have living wages. So I think our minimum wage right now is 19 something, and I'm going to miss it because it just changed recently. Say that again. It's 19 something in there, but I remember that it's 19 something. So we've had living wages for quite a while, and they've gone up recently, and I appreciate that. And that's something that City Council is constantly looking at. We do second chance hiring of justice involved. I talked about that earlier. We've been doing it since 2014. There are some corporations today in Durham and in other areas that still don't do second chance hiring of justice involved residents, completely equity focused. We introduced a community safety program. Everybody familiar with the program, the HEART program? It is a fantastic story. I love HEART. I brag them up everywhere that I go. Absolutely rooted in equity. Why? Because there's sometimes when the police response is not the right response for our residents. They need another alternative. I appreciate the thought process that went into creating that. It was definitely focused on equity. I've already talked about spending and participatory budgeting, and from an engagement perspective, we advocate for equitable community engagement. That is not telling. That's having a dialogue with residents and letting them be part of the conversation and hearing what they have to tell us, even when we won't like it. Not for us to like, it's to create a Durham where everybody can live and enjoy and benefit. So this is some of the things that we have done. I'm very proud of many of those things and most proud that we can continue to focus on equity. Equity levels the playing field and creates better outcomes for everyone. Thank you, and thank you for the work that you do. Questions, anyone? Comments?
Involved with gentrification, it seems like, that is hitting the, most disadvantage of our community and displacing them, and I'm not sure how the city is addressing that. I mean, like I'm in the development review committee, I keep getting many development plans from this developer, that developer wants to build, 500 unit condo complex, whatever, and, it just raises tax values or property values, and anyway, you know what I mean.
I live off 98 near Mineral Springs. Anyone else live in that value, in that area? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
No, but DevRev looks at that corridor every month.
Oh my goodness. Okay. And so it's an issue. And I would tell you that I think it's one that our city council wrestles with. We have a community development department that wrestles with it. It's very difficult. Durham is becoming increasingly less affordable. There's recognition of that. It's very difficult to overcome. I can tell you we're working through it.
In 30 years, whatever, when maybe Durham's economy cools off a bit, people are going to look back at this, and say, this was just like 147 going through the Haytime neighborhood. We just blew up the black neighborhood, part of our population and sent them all, outside the city and cheaper places. It seems like we're not doing, I don't know what we can do. I don't have an answer, but I'm just wondering how much is being done, can be done, whatever, because it feels like this is one of those big sea changes. And I just feel like it's a big deal.
So it is a big deal. And it is a sea change. I would tell you that we have a community development department that is thinking about that. They're building affordable housing. And so if you want to know more about what they're doing, I think there's a lot of information available, and they present to city council quite often on that. So look up community development. That's one of our departments, and that really is their focus. I can tell you that to keep people in their homes, that there have been various initiatives over the years from city council where they've supported our residents to pay taxes and things like that, that enable them to stay in their homes. Our community development department, our neighborhood improvement services department also has money to help with rehabbing or refurbishment of some homes where people are out of compliance that can get them back into compliance. So we're doing things throughout the organization. I can't tell you that it's enough because I don't know that. There's only so much that government can do, but we're doing the things that we can. But that is definitely a concern. Other questions or comments?
Actually, what you just brought up, I have a DevRev comment that may be a question. Do those affordable housing developments, do we get those?
Usually it says 5% or some, it seems awfully small in all these developments. That there'll be some number of units devoted to affordable housing, and it just seems like it's not enough to me. But that's what we're letting our developers get away with.
right?
Are you talking one? That's right. So we can have
When you're answering his question, are you talking specifically about the housing that is a part of the overall affordable housing bond investments, like what we're seeing done with those publicly owned lots? Or are you just talking about the private market doing its own thing? Because I want Brian to clarify exactly what he may be talking about, because those are separately regulated kinds of situations.
Thank you for making that clarification, because I think I am asking about publicly owned ones.
Okay.
I don't think we see those.
See them.
So they're not getting a bike and ped review on those developments, for starters. Hmm. Yeah.
And all those developments are mostly downtown, which is already
Yeah.
fairly transit connected, is in front of sidewalks, and, you know, in many different ways already enjoys the amenities that are found downtown, since most of those lots that have been repurposed for housing, mixed income, of course, because there's lower income
Sure.
housing there and affordable housing as well. So they may not necessarily need the same touch. I would hope that because they're being done in partnership with government, that they have bike racks and other kind of amenities like that on site.
And I encourage you to invite the community development folks here.
That's a great
So just
idea.
like I was invited,
Great
invite
idea.
community development here, and you'll have an opportunity to ask some questions.
Thank you.
Brian, one of the things is, as Scott pointed out, if it's a city-owned property, they're not going to go through the same review because they're not going to need a rezoning. I think DevRev pretty much is just going to deal with privately owned and developed properties.
Yeah, and I'm trying to apply an equity lens here to what we do. We're asking for multi-use paths and sheltered bus stops and all that on Carver and on Mineral Springs and all these other places that are out. And generally, those are upscale developments, I think, coming in. So, yeah, I mean, if they're mostly downtown, you're right. The infrastructure is largely already there, so maybe it's a non-issue. I'm wondering if we're leaving any gaps, or by we, I mean the city, not this commission. Thank you. I think inviting them is a great idea. Thank you.
But they're not all going to be downtown. Like Durham Housing Authority has properties that aren't downtown. They have the one that's up by West Point I have Seven Oaks, I think, over there, which clearly isn't downtown. So there's no guarantee that it's going to be right downtown just because it's city owned.
So two organizations, there's Durham Housing Authority and there's Community Development, which is a city department. Any other questions or comments? Sure.
Are there things within the city?
Are there things within the city government itself that are on your list to fix that, you know, you said check the box in 2014? Are there, but I mean, and you've said we have living wage policy, and so that's great. So there are some things that have been done, but are there other fights that you're fighting because there are disparities of some type within the city government? And
oh, absolutely.
okay.
And what we do in my department, instead of us leading the charge, mine is teaching the departments, the people that are in the departments, to lead the charge. So I don't have to think about it. They can think about it. So in there are countless things that we're doing in our Neighborhood Improvement Services Department. They came up with the Equitable Engagement Blueprint to show us how.
In collaboration with community, they came up with it.
Thank you. In collaboration with community.
I was in that room. That wasn't their idea to begin with. It started in this room, actually.
It absolutely did. And so in partnership with community, they came up with the Equitable Engagement Blueprint that teaches us as an organization how to engage the community. And that engagement is not just having a conversation and telling you what we want, right? It looks very different, but it's incumbent upon our departments to do that. Is there work that we need to do around employment? Yes. I'm working on one of the initiatives that will get more folks into the organization to provide more opportunities for our residents. We have the Office of Economic and Workforce Development that has a program teaching some of our residents to be entrepreneurs because there's opportunity here to bid on work with the city if you are an entrepreneur, depending on the work that you do and what our need is. So there are many, many areas and different departments are working on different things, but they're all thinking about equity and how to make a better Durham for everyone. And they can do that at their level. Our technology solutions department is working on digital equity. Why? We know that there are people that don't have digital access in our city. So we know and we think about equity, and the data will tell us that it's historically disadvantaged communities, primarily of color. If we can get it in place for them, it will benefit everyone.
Can you speak to how communities of people living with disabilities are being embraced by the equitable blueprint?
So yes, I would tell you that when we do anything, we make sure that we have considered our persons that might have disabilities and what it is that they need. So I didn't do it tonight, but even with PowerPoint presentations, we'll go through them and we'll figure out how can we make this something that everybody can read? Or if we are in a place where we're doing a community engagement, and there might be some people that are hearing impaired or that might have some sight issues, we're thinking about how do we make them part of this conversation as well? So how do we make it so that it's not just them? And my department has the Mayor's Committee for Persons with Disabilities. So we deal with them, we hear what their concerns are, and then we work on resolving those issues and making for a better Durham for everyone. Sure.
Is there anything in the works to adjust educational requirements for jobs? I'm seeing a lot of private companies are dropping the requirement for bachelor's and master's degrees because they're not really applicable to the role, and they've excluded folks because of that.
So you are right that it can be exclusionary. I don't work in HR anymore, so I'm not sure what it is that they're considering, but I have heard before that that's something that they're taking a look at. Our minimum educational requirement is a high school diploma or a GED. So that tends to be our minimum, but there are some other jobs where maybe we have a requirement in place and we are starting to ask ourselves, does the person really need this to have this job? And if they don't, why is it here? Because it's creating inequities. The playing field's not even. You were a great audience. You were very much worth that drive back from Charlotte, even though it was painful. So thank you so much. And thank you so much for the work that you are doing. We really do appreciate you. And we really are focused on equity in this organization and creating better outcomes for everyone. And the county is very much the same. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sharon. Okay, the next item on our agenda is a bit of old business. We did receive a response on the Roxborough walk audit and think that there are some action items on there. And maybe if it is okay, it sounds like PI was the committee where this was discussed. So maybe we could go a little out of order from our committee meetings. Would you be willing to talk a little bit about that, Nathan? Sorry, about the Roxborough walk audit response that you all discussed in committee, I believe.
We hadn't formulated a response yet. We were mostly just talked about it and about how there seemed to be some confusion from the city that we were talking about all of Roxborough, and we really just meant that narrow bit of the corridor. So we need to like clarify that we only meant like a few blocks of the multiple miles that is Roxborough. And then there was at least one typo in our letter that said bump out sign. We asked at one point that we wanted to add bump out signs to various right turns or something. And we needed to clarify what we meant. Did we mean bump outs and no turn on red signs, or?
I honestly have no idea. I think that's an artifact from an earlier draft. We can maybe clean that up really quick.
Yeah. And then they mentioned paper streets in there. We mentioned paper streets, and then he said the I team is working on paper streets, but they're only working on paper streets where the city owns property right there adjacent to the paper street. And so that means that they aren't looking at any of the paper streets that we care about. The ones where it is a street, it's just like, it just dead ends, but the right of way is still there and they just need to pave it already.
Yeah, just hasn't been built yet, right?
Yeah. Can we go through all of the points that we talked about, or how much do you want?
No, I think that's fantastic. I mean, you're welcome to, absolutely. And sorry for putting you on the spot for that, but
Okay.
so it would seem that we do need, is that the recommendation here, response, definitely an action item
Yeah.
to get back on that.
Yeah, I think we should respond and clarify some things, and ask some questions of them. Because they did have some things that they said that we had questions about, like why do school zones get special considerations that like, what's it called? Like a local neighborhood center is part of that. Why don't neighborhood centers get the same considerations as schools and other stuff? And we need the most updated speed study and average annual daily traffic.
Do we know where to get that? Okay.
Not Scott. Sean Egan has it for sure. And so we could just reply to him and ask for it.
Okay. I
Great,
mean,
thanks. We
I-
have a plan.
I can take that as my
Thank you.
action. Yeah.
That's great.
I will probably start with Sean and Brian.
Cool, great. So then moving on to new business, it sounds like there were some committee name changes recommended during at least the what is currently known as PI and currently known as Triple E. So maybe I'll turn it over to Ideal as chair. Would you like to change the name of the committee?
We're so creative. We want to go from Triple E to community engagement. Voila, big reveal, y'all. Clap for me.
Wow.
And y'all actually did it. Okay, but that's what we're proposing, just so that there's less confusion. So Ed, is there anything you want to add since you're in the meeting with me?
What all three of the E's were. I was thought it included my name, but I think ADL came up with a really good replacement for it.
We also didn't want to make another acronym. So we're stepping away from that trend and being rebels.
Right. Is there also a proposed sort of update, sort of like a Twitter line, formerly known as Twitter, sorry, line for what the committee is described as for update on the website?
Oh, I gave a little short, sort of like mission-y type thing.
I didn't get it in time to have it printed on this.
Oh, sure. Okay. I have it. Let me pull it
Okay.
up on the.
It's like maybe you could just, speak it out loud.
Sure. And y'all, because I couldn't get the text thread to download, I just had to remember it off the top of my head. But please feel free, for those of you who attended and others in the room, to edit. But we used to be Triple E strive to engage the Durham community and opportunities to understand the importance of, well, no, not we used to be. Let me just give y'all what we decided on. Triple E, now community engagement, strives to engage the Durham community and opportunities to A, understand the importance of bicycling and walking. Oh, importance and benefits. 2, submit opinions to studies, planning, and design phases of projects that can positively impact bicycling and walking. 3, advocate for multimodal and public transit. Accessible multimodal. Sorry, I'm remembering the conversation as we speak. And 4, and participate in the joys of walking and cycling. Huh?
Joy and necessity.
Yes.
I think we landed on.
Oh, yeah. The proposed description strives to engage the Durham community in the opportunities to understand the importance of bicycling and pedestrianism, submit opinions to studies, planning and design phases of projects that can positively impact bicycling and walking, and to participate in the joys of walking and cycling. Yes.
Okay. Well, we added a few little things. We didn't want to use the word pedestrianism because that felt a little jargony. So we were like, let's just call it bicycling and walking or cycling and walking. And we wanted to make sure that there was a statement about accessibility, that for some people, walking and cycling is not a recreational activity, but quite a necessity, but that when there is good infrastructure, it can be very joyous and it's additive to your life and has benefits.
Great. Any other questions or comments on name change or website description of the committee? I think we probably should vote on changing the name. Does that feel appropriate?
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Community Engagement Committee.
Great job. I love it.
That's great. All right. Nathan, pie?
All right, pie is cumbersome and has a lot of words in it that aren't just pie. So we decided to make it shorter and we're just gonna call it planning and policy. And for short, we can call it P&P. And after hearing that description, we don't have one yet. Because I only have like bullet points and I can't like cobble them together into a thing right now, but we'll get a description later.
Okay, fantastic.
That's it.
Any questions on that, or anyone want to move to accept the name change? Planning and policy?
I move that PIE's name change to planning and policy.
Second.
All right. How do you all vote?
Aye.
All right, any opposed? All right, I is now P&P, planning and policy. Fantastic. Okay. All right. Oh, it's 7:57.
Yeah.
We might need to move a little bit out of order because our next presentation is going to be from Carl, who is on his way here. So maybe we should move next to committee and liaison reports. So this month we tried something a little bit different because we knew that this agenda was going to be pretty packed. We got the committee reports in advance in writing. Correct me if I'm wrong, Hannah. They were not sent out in advance, but we have them here printed.
Yes, I
That's
got
correct.
them, not enough time to send them out in advance. But yes, they are printed except for, I guess, community engagement, EEE. That was, it's fine. That was not included. So maybe if you want to, okay. Yeah, maybe just speak that update.
Yeah, so the update for EEE is pretty quick. We talked a lot about the scorecard and what the public facing meetings could be. At this point, all people that we're supposed to review, anyone who was assigned a plan to look at has reviewed it, has dumped projects. People followed directions and did the things and put them in the spreadsheet. So now it's incumbent upon us to share those spreadsheets with staff who can help us to fill in the blanks as to what the various data points are that they can rattle off their head a little more quickly. So it's now about getting with the staff to look at this so that come August, July, August, come August, we can score the plans based on the rubrics and the collected information so that we can then put together a product that goes public facing. We did find out since the last EEE meeting, now community engagement meeting, that Bike Durham is actually doing something very similar to us. And so we have decided to combine forces, share resources, and to not double the work, and also to not confuse the staff. So yay for that. We talked a little bit about Bike Month kickoff. Turnout was great for all the events that we supported, whether that is the movie screening or the Bike Month kickoff event with the ride. Everything was great. We got much better weather, especially with the rescheduling. And y'all know about the name change. Y'all know about our update for the committee description. And we also talked a lot about the Disability Freedom and Justice Caravan that's coming on June 25th, and wanted to make sure that we knew more about that, and that that's a nationwide event, and it's going to be having a tour stop here in Durham, several stops here in Durham, actually. And it's meant to bring awareness for the disability community. Of the two stops, one of the events will be a more energetic and sensory event in nature, and the other one will be less stimulating to accommodate for varying needs that people may have. But both events will have ASL, closed caption, and other services to make sure those events are fully accessible to our community. And we're saying that this isn't necessarily something that BPAC should be tabling at per se, but we're pushing anything at, but to come and enjoy the programming, connect with that community, and of course, share information about that event, which I do believe by now has some promotional materials available, and I can share those on our social media. And yeah, so that's all we had.
Questions there? I don't know, Scott, Devrev, we have a summary of the items discussed in lieu of the meeting. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, we've got 3 or 4 new. We often ask for raised crosswalks at intersections to slow car traffic down and increase access for disabled people and people with strollers and things. And I was in San Diego last week, and they have those everywhere. And I don't know if we have them anywhere in Durham. I don't know where we have raised crosswalks, but I get it now. And so, but our developers, when we say that, I don't think it ever gets implemented. And so I don't know how to like hold their feet to the fire on that kind of thing, but it does, it makes a difference. And I appreciate it now. So we'll continue to ask for it, but I don't know, like even the one we just did, Marissa did, the developer came back and said, no, they made some excuse about this might impair ambulances or whatever getting into our neighborhood. Well, this was only a 25-unit condo complex. There's one way in and one way out. Why not have a raised crosswalk? It's not like ambulances are going to go across that all the time so I don't know why there was pushback on that, other than it takes a little bit more pavement to put that in place. But anyway, so a little diversion there, but that's one of the things that I think we need to, keep asking for and try to not let it slip through the cracks like it has been.
I kind of want to add a question for that. That's something that's come up a lot with just like any sort of requests that are brought to the city about adding a raised crosswalk or even speed humps as opposed to speed cushions. And so I'd be interested to know what San Diego is doing in terms of their emergency services, because that is the response that we often hear is, oh, it's going to jeopardize emergency services.
I mean, they did have a wheel cut in those, but they're very mild. It's a whatever you call the sort of soft one.
Yeah.
But they do slow you down. You want to go over it at 40 miles an hour, but it's not like a speed bump where you have to go down to 5 miles per hour. So I think it's all just a matter of, the right design for them. But these did have, and I don't know whether it was 2 cutouts for, the width of ambulances, or I don't know how they did it. I was mostly seeing them on smaller like neighborhood roads, not on, bigger thoroughfares.
Not on something like Fayetteville Street or NC 55 or something.
Exactly.
Or brought to the attention of an approaching vehicle. What are they going to see as they approach a raised
It
crosswalk?
has either the like arrows that kind of go up the hump, that will be one sort of arrow, and then on the other one, another arrow, or maybe it was just a raised crosswalk with the normal sort of stripe crosswalk markings.
Some will have signage as well to indicate that there's a bump coming up, depending on how it's designed.
It might have had that too. I can't remember, but they were like on every block. So people are so used to it. I don't know whether they needed signage or not.
I know that that issue came up a lot during the shared streets work that I did with several streets in my neighborhood. And what happened is that the staff person who reviews speed bump kinds of requests and balances the policy around all the needs like emergency services. One of the things that I learned through that process is that depending on how many calls for some type of emergency response a neighborhood street may get, that street may be disqualified from getting those bumps because that would cause a lot of damage to the equipment and the trucks. It would also negatively impact response times. And that was a big deal, especially for streets that have a lot of seniors on them. And there's a lot of response for a variety of health needs that those neighbors may have. So we compromised in those situations and did painted curb cutouts and delineator posts, and where appropriate, also traffic circles, because if fire engines or emergency responders, just melee one of those delineator posts, well, no harm, no foul, it's fine. But cars tend to do that less.
Thanks. That's an interesting place. Maybe we can refine what we're asking for and understand it a little bit better. That's great. Okay.
I have a more mundane question about DevRev. Are we meeting in July?
It's on my calendar, and whoever can come, can come. I mean, everybody will get their assignments, and if you want to be there and talk about them, fine. I mean, we didn't meet last week.
Right.
And so I'd say if 2 or 3 of us want to get together, then I'll hold a meeting, yes.
I know the cases won't stop, so.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
And I'd like to also add that I would like to go to one of the meetings as a new
Great.
BPAC member.
We'd love to have another member. Yeah. So we're definitely having it.
Can I just say, Scott, like, keep those comments coming. So I know it's complicated. We do hear the thing about response times, emergency services. There's all those kind of competing priorities, but like having your team weigh in and say, like, we need this, we want this. It's always helpful to have that. So yeah.
Okay, maybe just we'll toss it over to planning and policy. Was there anything from your shared committee report you'd like to address?
I want to talk about 2 things. 1, we're not meeting in July. 2, the most important thing we want to ask for in the UDO rewrite is to add vehicle miles traveled analysis, or VMT, which is simply the number of vehicle miles traveled on a roadway over a specified period of time. It can be analyzed as using some big data tools that already exist in the field. We propose that section 3.3.5 of the UDO be modified to include an additional requirement to study VMT. The guidelines for traffic impact analysis documents should also be updated. We would like guidelines which would be similar to California's guidelines, which state that if a development will increase VMT, e.g. a suburban development on the outskirts of the city, it must either contribute to another means of reducing VMT, such as helping fund a greenway or transit project, or modify the site to reduce VMT, such as adding office space or retail to a residential development. If a development is anticipated to reduce VMT, then no further VMT analysis would be required, for example, like a grocery store in a food desert. We believe this metric should be considered to set a standard that Durham supports transit-oriented and mixed-use infill development rather than suburban sprawl. I have an example traffic impact analysis guideline from a city in California that we can send along with our recommendation to be like, hey, here's how you do that, to planning and the consultants. And that's the most important thing to come out of it, other than what I already talked about with the letter. And we reviewed a couple of sidewalk plans that were in the 25% phase. They weren't super in depth. They were generally okay. And we made a lot of comments about things where they could be better, but we'll have to wait on better plans to then continue to review and make comments on. And that's good enough. You can read the rest in your packet.
Great, thank you.
I'm just going to chime in if you don't mind. To the extent we are going to have printed committee reports, if we can get those emailed out ahead of the meeting, I would appreciate that. Thanks.
All right, so here we can pause, we can come back to the liaison committee reports. How about if we turn attention to city update from Carl and conversation on potential referendum? Yeah, thank you.
Let's see, okay, yeah. This is a new view here. This is like intimidating to do. I have to like talk to this kind of panel here. Oh my gosh, yeah. Exactly, I know, it's so hard. We got 2 minutes, right?
You can have 5.
Okay. Okay, so big picture, as you all know, last night, the city council approved this November 5th bond referendum that includes 85 million for parks and 115 million for streets and sidewalks. And so just sort of like zooming ahead to the sort of conclusion here, as you may know, once it's approved for a referendum, the city staff can help to sort of provide guidance on what's in the bond referendum, but they legally can't advocate for it. And so the bond referendum now comes back to us as the electeds and the citizens of Durham to really advocate for the bond. So my goal here is to get you excited about, I think you'll be excited about this, but to get you excited about it and hope to ask you to be involved in the advocacy for this bond so we can get it passed in November. So that's the big picture here. So I've got a couple slides here. I should say, so Erin Convery is here from transportation. So all the things I don't know, she knows. So she's the resource person. Yeah. Okay, great. So, okay. So, right. So this started out back in March. So the staff presented potential projects for a bond referendum in March, 2024. Yeah, so yeah, this information refined, compiled 2 bond orders. Right, so 2 bond orders, 1 for parks, 1 for roads and sidewalks. And then, yeah, we held this hearing yesterday. So that's all you know that stuff. Or what is it, this one? Oh. 2 questions on the ballot? There will be 2, yeah, exactly, yeah. So the first thing is, I didn't skip one, did I? Okay, if you go to the next one then. I don't know if I'm like, yeah, okay. So it's, the first one there's a bond order 1 is parks and recreation. I'm happy to talk about that, but I figured you'd probably be more interested in the sidewalks and streets. So the first one is 85 million, essentially for the former Wheels Fund Park, as well as a new sort of revised kind of destination park combining East End and Longmeadow parks. So that's 85 million for parks. Yeah, super exciting stuff. Yeah. So the number 2, bond order 2 is streets and sidewalks. And so you'll see there's 4 components, 4 buckets of this 115 million. So starts with 60 million for new sidewalks. And we'll talk about what those are in a second. Another 30 million for supplemental street paving and maintenance. Another 15 million for supplemental sidewalk repairs. And then 10 million, we got this 10-year plan to like pave all the unpaved roads in Durham. I think the council 10 years or maybe 5 years ago, Aaron, do you know, maybe 5 years ago?
I don't know that number off the
So
top
this
of
is
my
to
head.
kind of,
I can find out.
So it's 10 million for that. So essentially of the 115 million for streets and sidewalks, you've got like 75 million is for sidewalks. So that's a good chunk for sidewalks. So next slide. All right. So, and I think Aaron did this map, so you can help me if so the new sidewalks, this is the 60 million. And this is essentially 11 sidewalk projects you may have heard about, but these are ones that are like, and there's some money for some of these, but they're shovel ready sidewalk. So they haven't started. So it's 11 new projects that are either in the like acquisition or almost ready for construction, right?
Yeah, so how these sidewalks were selected from the kind of universe of ongoing sidewalk projects we have these are the most delivery ready. So they're the furthest along in the process. So all of these are currently in the right-of-way stage. One is like is just finished, or I guess at the time we put this map together, just finished design and was about to move into the right-of-way phase. But essentially they are all in that part of the pipeline. So if or when funding were to become available through a bond, they would be ready to spend that money quicker, essentially, than some of our other projects that are further back in the design process.
And so they're the ones on the map you see in that kind of like orange or yellow corridors. Those are the projects. You'll see also on the map. So the map includes the green areas. If you can read that sort of that legend there, those are the green and green and equitable infrastructure areas the city's identified, right? So a number of these kind of are in or touch on those areas. And then I think, let's see. So the pink, help me, Aaron. Pink is like.
So the pink and blue colors you see are criteria that are used in the CIP equity scoring process. So the pink areas are identified by HUD as low-income census tracts. The blue areas are census block groups that have greater than a population of people of color greater than 65.4%. And then the purple, the kind of mix between the two, is where those overlap. And so, like I mentioned earlier, the reason those are shown here is to tie it into the CIP equity scoring. Those are metrics that are used at that kind of citywide process when CIP projects are being scored and considered.
Thank you. Yeah, Scott.
See all the colored areas, I see the yellow lines where the projects are, and it doesn't look like the yellow lines are in the colored areas. Am I missing something?
Yeah, so a lot of these are,
No,
go ahead,
yeah,
Carl.
yeah. No, I think you're, it doesn't all line up, but I think
Yeah.
it sort of touches, talk more.
Yeah,
about that.
those layers there are for reference, so you can see which of these projects fall in those areas and which do not. Those geographies were not why these projects were selected. Again, that went back to that project readiness factor. So this is more to show which of these projects do overlap with some of those areas that we use in some of our equity scoring and other processes.
Yeah, it's helpful. So again, 11 projects, 25 unique sidewalk corridors and gaps, and about 12 plus miles of sidewalk. And so the estimated cost, and I don't know if you want the details here, but essentially it costs about 62 million. There's a big chunk of that is 113 million for right-of-way acquisition. Some of the funds we have in hand, right? And so essentially the 62 million is the estimated net cost for these 11 projects to do. And if you go to the next slide, we can show you exactly. So these are the projects. And if you can't read those, I'll read them. So the first one is East Club Boulevard sidewalks. Next is Hillendale Road bicycle and ped. Number 3 is Maureen Road bicycle and ped. And again, these are things you've probably seen, on plans before. 4, which one's that, Aaron? That's sort of the bike and walk. SW.
We've got a couple that are kind of bundles. Let me pull those up because, to be very honest, I have a hard time rattling off which
The
go with
numbers,
which.
yeah.
It's 68, 69, 66. So let me pull that list up so that I'm not saying the wrong segments with the wrong project. One sec.
So 5 is LaSalle Street, 6 is North Duke Street sidewalk, 7 is NC 54, 8 is Rayner Street, right? And then 8's one of the actually, or I'm sorry, if you look at 9 and 10, Aaron, and tell us about that. And then 11 is Cornwallis Street sidewalk and bike lanes. So while Aaron's looking those up, any questions about those or just kind of reaction thoughts on these projects?
What's the extent of the Hillendale project? Does that go up to Rose of Sharon?
That does not go all the way up to Rose of Sharon.
So it goes 85 to
147, I believe.
So it's not north of, it's like
Brian, am I correct on those bounds?
by the medical center to, yeah.
Yeah, it stops just south of 85, right? Which will continue south to Irwin.
So it doesn't get you over 85.
And I do have 66, 60 and 69 pulled up here. So 66, which I think is line 4. It's a little hard to see from here, but that includes a gap on Hillsborough Road, a gap on Holloway Street, Gary Ave to Guthrie Ave, Old Oxford from Roxborough to Dearborn, and Corporation from Duke to Mangum. Sidewalk 68, which
It's number 9.
is number 9 on this list, is these are a couple small gaps. If y'all are familiar from the bike walk plan, the category of sidewalk gaps, which are kind of pretty short segments that connect like less than 500 feet to connect to the existing network. This is a gap on Southwest Durham Drive, gap on Broad Street, Holt School Road, North Point Drive, Fayetteville Street, Stadium Drive, and Rayner Street. And then this also includes, in addition to some of those shorter gaps, does include the Fulton shared use path that Brian just mentioned. And then sidewalk 69 includes
a sidewalk gap on Neal, Shannon, McGehee, and University. So each of those is kind of a bundle of several segments that have moved through, moved through the design and project delivery process as a bundle, as a package.
Cool. Any questions about that? Any other thoughts? Brian?
Yeah, in the context of talking to our neighbors about this, taking it as a given, you've picked the ones that are the most shovel ready. Like realistically, when do we expect to see concrete going in if this bond passes?
Yeah, so I think some of these, my mic on?
Nope, I don't think so.
Now is it working?
Yeah.
Okay, weird. It was blinking blue instead of green.
Too many mics are on it, it goes blue.
Ah, gotcha. Okay. So some of these are further along than others. For example, these are in order of project readiness in this table. So for example, East Club, right-of-way acquisitions are complete. This we could be looking to bid, this calendar year. Cornwallis, which is at the bottom of the list, that's the one I mentioned where design is just wrapping up. And we've actually, Public Works has worked to bring a firm on board to help with those right-of-way acquisitions. So that's just getting started on right-of-way acquisitions, which can be a little bit variable from a timing perspective. It can depend on how many parcels there are, and then also, of course, how long negotiations take with any given property owner. So that one is, we're looking a couple years from now till that's probably on the ground. So there's a range represented on this chart here. Yeah.
Yeah, Chris.
I just kind of want to, this is a little bit tangential, but looking at the numbers, I kind of ballpark this, and it looks like it's about 5 million a mile for these sidewalks, just for the local expense, and about 10 million per mile in terms of total expense. Is that sort of normal representation of cost of doing a sidewalk, or are these particularly challenging corridors? I think just
Sure.
as a layperson,
Yeah.
that's
a good question.
It seems
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So as part of this exercise, when finance reached out about putting together this information, we worked with Public Works to do a pretty comprehensive update of our project cost estimates. And a couple things that are reflected here that are sometimes we hone in on just the construction cost. This captures a little bit more than that. So these are taking into account, we are seeing higher prices for actual right-of-way acquisition, like what we're paying to property owners. We are also, right now, as I mentioned with Cornwallis as an example, we are looking at trying to contract out more of our acquisition. So there's the cost of those services becomes a direct cost for the project. But that does let us move a lot faster on those right-of-way acquisitions. We have, at the end of the day, staff has certain capacity, and so that lets us move faster on that. And with the way we're seeing construction costs escalate, like the faster, even if we're paying additional for those services, long-term, there's the benefit of the sooner we can get these projects on the ground, the less they're going to cost construction-wise. So those two pieces are factored into these cost estimates. We also have factored in, we rely on consultants or contractors to manage some of these projects when they get into the construction phase. So that has been factored into these costs. And then lastly, we did an exercise taking into account some of the recent bids we've gotten on sidewalk projects to update construction cost estimates too. So those numbers you see there are, they're estimates to the best of our Public Works staff knowledge, but they are an attempt to capture the full picture of what it would cost for these projects rather than, how much does it cost to pour that concrete per se.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, Jeffrey.
Is there an estimate on what the total cost, including financing, is going to be? I know they can't know exactly because no one knows what interest rates are going to be when the bonds are actually.
I do have a slide on that in the end, a little
Okay.
bit on that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Follow-up question. I'm sure one thing neighbors.
New member on the bike BPAC, right, Tony? Yeah, nice to meet you.
Yeah, good to meet you. I'm sure these will be amortized from property tax increases. How much would a $200 million bond issue increase property taxes for?
Yeah, that's the last slide I'll show you. Yeah, good question. It's an appropriate one. Unless you want to go to the next one. So, so these are two of the other buckets, right? So there's the sidewalk repairs of 15 million, street paving and maintenance 30 million. And the only thing I want to say on this one is that you'll see that that chart on the bottom is like the next 3-year CIP, which envisions 10 million a year for 3 years for sidewalk repair, and then 20 million a year for annual pavement maintenance. And so essentially what the bond is doing is taking half of the cost, the 30 million for sidewalk repair, putting half of that on the bond. The rest of it will put in the CIP. Same thing with annual maintenance of streets. It's just taking half of that cost, putting into the bond to sort of have more flexibility. And the other half is going to be in the CIP.
What's a CIP?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry for the jargons. Yeah. So that's our annual. So, you know, we use bond funds to pay for big infrastructure projects. We also have an annual capital improvement program, which is our sort of annual budget for capital and infrastructure stuff. So some stuff is in that annual CIP. Other stuff is sort of funded by bonds.
Thank you.
Yeah. The CIP did pass with the budget. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Correct. Okay, next slide. Unless there's questions about that. And then this one, so I don't know if you folks have an interest in this. This is just the unpaved roads piece that we're adding. This is to kind of catch up and like help us reach that goal. Here it is. In 2019, the Council directed Public Works to pave all remaining unpaved dirt roads over a 10-year period. So we're just kind of catching up by having that piece of unpaved roads in there. So those are the 4 buckets. Yes, Nathan.
Does the unpaved road things like include connecting paper streets, like where?
That's a question for Aaron. Yeah.
I believe this is specifically for like current gravel roads. I can confirm that with Public Works, but I believe the paper streets is a separate thing.
I mean, the key bullet here is the one you see there about curb, gutter, drainage improvements, or sidewalks are not included. So a little bit disappointing. It's partly just it's a cost question. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this is the financial impact. I think this is your question, Tony and Jeff. So right now with a penny in the sales tax, we generated about $4 million. So this 200 million, this sort of package assumes current year value of a penny with a 3% annual growth rate, assuming like, so they would sort of, that penny which generates 4 million would increase by 3 million every year. We know we have a revaluation coming. So this is based on the current value of a penny. That's going to change when we do the reval next year. But so these orders are based on that current assumption or the current value of a penny. It's based on amortization schedule at 5.34% interest rates. That's the assumed interest rate, right? And so there will be an impact on the property tax. That's the bottom line. So starting in FY26, which would start next year, July 1 of next year, there'll be a 3.45 cent increase in the property tax to fund these bonds. And then and that kind of continues for about 7 years. And then after 7 years, the impact decreases on the rate after year 7. And by FY 2047, so it's like, I think it's a 20-year bond, right? Yeah. The rate would fall to about 50 cents on the tax rate by FY 47 if we're all still around. So, and so then at the bottom of so the average rate over the debt term is about 2.51 cents per $100 of valuation on property. Did I get that right, Aaron?
The information on this slide is about as best as I can speak to the finances side of this.
Yeah.
So if folks have more in-depth questions, I'm happy to record them and take them to our finance folks where this is really in their wheelhouse and get you guys the right answers.
So all those numbers are per $100 of
value.
Of value.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of property value, right? Assessed value, correct.
Assessed value. Okay.
So excited? Yeah, good. Yeah. And I think I'm excited about our budget, both the annual CIP we approved as well as these bonds. we're trying to address these. I mean, we've got a lot of infrastructure needs in Durham. We're growing as a city. And so we recognize that we're asking citizens to dig deep, both with our tax increase this year, as well as the bond referendum. And we hope folks will respond because we're trying to respond to the deeply expressed desires of folks in Durham to get more sidewalks, to have better roads, and to have less people dying on the roads. So. All right, that's it. Thank you all. So in terms of the plan for marketing, so I think there's been some conversations. Often the chamber has been involved. I think it's one of the roles they take on often is helping to market, especially like streets and parks and sidewalks. So I think the chamber will play a leadership role. That's to be sort of finalized. And then once we develop a game plan for how we want to market this thing, I'll come back to BPAC with more specific asks of you all. But would love for you all to be actively involved in advocating for the bond referendum. I think this will be great for Durham, not only the streets and sidewalks, but also the park stuff is really exciting. So thank you.
Yes, thank you both, Aaron and Carl. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Thanks for rushing back.
Yes, I was
appreciate it.
just been looking at like, this is nerdy stuff, looking at like freeway caps and bus rapid transit, so cool stuff in Richmond.
Great. Okay, so we will transition back to liaison reports. Most liaison reports, I think, were included in printing here, but just to quickly go around, no updates, Royal, from NCC? Okay, great, thank you. Nathan, anything you want to mention on Duke updates?
Duke is in discussions with Go Triangle about their Go Pass, where it's free for Duke employees and students to ride on Go Triangle buses with the Go Pass. But that's been delayed and I don't know the status of it. And I need to find out who does know the status because everything at Duke is extremely siloed and it's impossible to figure out who is making decisions about things.
Mary Rose, anything additional from Vision Zero?
Not additional, but I wanted to call out that there's a few public engagement opportunities for the Vision Zero action plan starting next week. So Lauren Grove's going to be at all of these events. June 26th, there's 12 to 2 p.m. adult recess hosted by DPR. On the same day from 3 to 6 p.m. at Durham Central Park, there's the Wednesday Farmers Market. June 27th from 4 to 7 p.m. at Durham Station. I think it's just her going to be there. I don't think there's a separate event. June 29th from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. For the Saturday Farmers Market at Central Park.
Great, thank you. And
Mary, do you want to touch on the resolution at all?
Sure, yeah. So I can't recall which meeting this was, but City Council passed the Vision Zero resolution, which is very long, and we have a few of them printed out, but it's also available online. But the main part is that they added some dates, some deadlines for their Vision Zero action plan, being that we reduce traffic deaths and serious injuries by 50% by 2035, and then achieve the goal of 0 fatalities and serious injuries on Durham roadways by 2045. And so that's going to be having that part agreed upon and like set in our plan allows us to request specific funding so that we can implement the plan.
thanks for sharing that. It sounds like there's some copies if anybody wants to check that out. And I think last meeting, we understood that Jeff stepped off of DOST. So somehow I have accidentally also become the liaison for the trails. I'm not really sure how that happened, but I was going to sit in on their trail committee meeting, which was canceled for this month. So I guess maybe I'll report on that in future times. Yeah, completely accidental. Are there any other liaison reports that I have missed in that roundup, or any other community updates?
I have one quick one I forgot to mention was there is a shared micro mobility permit application review committee. Basically, there are The city is renewing its contracts with companies that provide e-scooters and e-bikes. And so 5 applications have been received from Spin, Bird, Lime, G-Bike, and Bayo. And so there are 4 people who are reviewing those applications and scoring them, and a decision will be made by the end of June as to which one or ones of these companies. So we'll be seeing their stuff on our streets and sidewalks and whatever when that gets selected.
Are you one of those people?
I actually kind of have a question that I'm not sure you can answer. I'm just curious about process. So as part of that review, so 2 parts. One is you mentioned Bird and Spin separately, and I'm not sure if everybody here is aware they are actually the same company now, but I think they're still operating separately. Everything's in the same app. Are those treated as separate permits?
Right now, we got separate applications from them. So I guess they will be evaluated separately.
Gotcha. And then I guess the other question I have is related to the approval process. Are you primarily reviewing these like just at face value of this is what the permit says, or is anything involving their history of operation in Durham being evaluated as part of?
There is a scoring sheet, and I actually haven't looked at it in that much detail. I've just been scanning the applications that came in. And so we have a meeting to, like next week to kind of go through it in more detail. And we're supposed to have all read them all in detail by then. But these were very thorough applications talking about, their mission and their goals and, just a lot of background information as well as responding to the questionnaire.
Yeah. How about their compliance?
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with my fellow commissioner here. They have not been particularly good about sharing data when requested, as was part of their original agreements when they were originally here. Also, when I'm out and about, which I do often, one of the most frequent forms of litter I encounter are scooters tossed aside in the central part of a sidewalk. And the disregard with which that is handled and how complaints are addressed. So I don't know. I mean, I definitely like having another mobility option in the city, and I see how frequently they're used. I just wonder whether we should take the approach that other cities have about having designated parking locations for them. And there also being potentially penalties for people who do not return the scooters back to the parking locations. I don't know how we would do that, but I think the reality is that when I think about people with different disabilities, I'm often annoyed by the carelessness of these companies and the people who operate them in such a manner. So we need to figure that out, but there needs to be a balance.
And to add to that ideal, while folks are riding them, I believe I can't remember which scooter company has this on it might be all of them, but it says very explicitly, like, do not ride these on the sidewalk. Yeah. And no, it says it, surprisingly. And we can have a conversation about how safe it actually is to ride them on the road. But the fact of the matter is they're not supposed to be operated on sidewalks. They operate at a speed that is unsafe for sidewalks. And we see folks all around town riding them, oftentimes unknowingly that they're not supposed to be ridden on sidewalks, but also it says it on the scooter. And so there's a level of responsibility that the rider takes in that sense. But my other question I wanted to ask was how soon we would expect the rollout of the new scooters, if possible, and definitely the new e-bikes here in downtown.
Sorry to add one more thing to this, but you bring up a great point. As I understand it, the current list of permittees include some newer vehicle types, including e-bikes. I think one of the things that's probably tangential to our task here, but I think should probably be included as part of this if we're going to be approving a permit for somebody to operate with e-bikes, is that currently under Durham's ordinances, e-bikes are not permitted on greenways and shared use paths. And that's, I understand the spirit with which that happened, especially with the issues of like scooters riding on sidewalks, but that also means that technically within city limits, you can't go on like the Ellerby Creek Trail, you can't go on the American Tobacco Trail, which is incredibly limiting. So hopefully that's something that is kind of flag is raised as part of that. If we're approving something and then you're adding a bunch more e-bikes, not you, but like we're adding much or allowing a bunch more e-bikes to be used by folks, I think that's going to be important for them to be able to actually get around safely, as being able to use those greenways.
Well, if I could add that too, because there was actually some conversation going on today between the city attorney and Charlie Reese, former city council member, about this exact issue. So I think it's something that would be great to have BPAC take up and sort of have an opinion on, because I think it's something we're going to have to probably wrestle with at the council level. So I would love for this group to weigh in on that and sort of like to, because you're right, there's trade-offs both ways. There could be safety concerns with e-bikes on greenways and what was it? Greenways and
So the language I believe is shared use.
Shared use paths, yeah.
Which include multi-use paths and greenways.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I will say also, like, not to get too into the weeds here, the city did adopt. Sure, the city did adopt the state definition of an pedal assisted or electric assisted, I forget what the definition is, bicycle, which does have some restrictions about speed and capability. It's primarily like 20-mile-per-hour thing, and that's kind of a speed that somebody could go on a regular bike who's fairly strong and trying to go that fast. So I think like implementing something like a speed limit makes a lot of sense, but probably going to need to like allow those at some point in some form or fashion, just with the obvious caveat that that'll have to be considered in terms of pedestrian safety as well.
Yeah, legal e-bikes nationally already have a class system. Class 1, pedal assist only up to 20 miles per hour. Class 2, pedal assist and throttle up to 20. Class 3, throttle up to 20, pedal assist up to 28. And so the simplest solution is to just say class 1 e-bikes are allowed on trails. And maybe we can allow class 2 e-bikes as well. That's what a lot of like national parks do. Like Acadia National Parks has miles and miles and miles of carriage roads, which are just gravel paths throughout the whole park. And it's class 1 e-bikes only. And so there's already like an industry standard that we could just say class 1 or class 2, and people would know what that means. And class 1 and maybe class 2 already comply with the state law and are legal in North Carolina. Class 3 is maybe illegal in North Carolina, but at least class 1 is legal in North Carolina.
My agency had just adopted something like that for our conservation easements. So yeah, it's a good strategy. Yeah. It sounds like it could be a discussion for the newly named Planning and Policy Committee.
I wonder though, historically, what I had been told is that some of the agreements with the landowners that, like, I guess shared or gave easement to the trails wouldn't ever have any kind of motor assisted anything on those trails. So it might be something that's kind of baked into the pie of some of our older trails. And that's what I was told a long time ago about why that was not allowed, so that people wouldn't end up there with forerunners. So that's one thing that I heard. But the accompaniment to this, and this is something that I had begged Parks and Recreation to do at the beginning of the pandemic when everybody and their mother came out to the trails, which I thought was amazing. I was like, yes, trails, we love them. And this is why we need them for good times and hard times. And also, I think Parks and Recreation really needs to, with her support and other people's support, but my recommendation was that there really does need to be better signage and community education around the fact that you can't have your child on a Tonka truck swerving back and forth in front of a blind turn on over and under the line because the bicyclist coming from around the corner can't see your child and they're going to run into it. And that is much more likely to be the case on a cycle that's going much faster. So that's always just been sort of my heartburn, is that while many of our trails are built on old rail beds that are very flat and have nice clear lines of sight, enough of them are not. And I think about LRB Creek and some of those pin turns, and I'm like, yeah, plus the roots that are lifting up the pavement. And I'm like, yeah, that would be a bad idea. In Washington, D.C., when I ride e-bikes and scooters, what I notice is that in certain places, it automatically, because of the zones, throttles me down or makes it impossible for me to use those things on near any of the monuments. So you get near the MLK monument, your scooter or e-bike will not work. It just stops. And so there are ways of geofencing them that, and it's very precise. So there, I wish. But these companies can be forced to do that, because I don't know how they did it, but as soon as I like passed one crosswalk, they were like, "Oh, you're at the MLK Memorial. That's it. Like you got to get off this thing and walk." And I was like, "Oh, that's a bummer," but that's what it did.
I wanted to point out two things. One, you are right that there's a weird thing with like getting agreements with the landowners. And there's different definitions between like motor and motorized vehicle. And our signage doesn't necessarily agree with what the city ordinances are, motor versus motorized. But also it eliminates the opportunity for people in motorized wheelchairs to use greenways. And so that is something that we need to also consider if we're going to address that.
I actually think there is an exception. There's a specific thing that calls out mobility assistance. I don't remember the exact language, but there is actually a section that says that if it's something to enhance or required for mobility, and it goes like less than, I forget what it is, like 15 miles an hour or something like that. I think it's not a lawyer, but I think it's attempting to capture like electric wheelchairs based on what I saw on there. And it's in that same section of the ordinance. So I can point it out if you'd like to see it.
Carl, I told you this would be a vigorous discussion on BPAC, didn't I? I love it. So what would be the most helpful output to you? Do you want us to study this and come up with just the facts? These are policies that are available. Or do you want us to try and come up with a consensus position on this is what we think y'all ought to try to do in City of Durham to clarify this?
It's a good question, and I'm reluctant to give you all like homework, and then like because I'm guessing this will come to us.
You can give us homework sometimes.
Yeah.
It's okay.
I mean, it might be good to have like just on this question, the narrow question of like e-bikes and like and greenways and shared paths. It'd be good to have like a BPAC opinion on that, you know.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, it may be what Nathan said, that there's a simple way to do it, like whatever, class 1, class 2, but having that would be helpful. So if, assuming this does come to council, we have some input from BPAC.
Can I make a suggestion, since we don't have meetings next month, apart from DevRev, I think, but this is something everybody's interested in. I do think it would fall in PNP, but I think the interest is actually commission-wide. Can we maybe just start an email thread and people can start sharing what they know and sharing what they think? And we can maybe do this on a little time-shifted way, and then come together again and discuss it and come up with a consensus. Is everybody good with that? So we can participate as we want to. I think some people are really interested in this, so I'm not worried about participation.
Yeah, I really like that. And you know, the last time we sat like this together, you had asked about the Destination Durham Master Plan. And while they do not have any community-based research to back up their freeway cap idea, they did mention their desire to support more trails and parks in the city. And so given that they are also an institution that's looking at how to make Durham more attractive to tourism, and that is something that they highlighted in their town halls, I think that might also be another group that might be interested in how we think of these things collectively, since they're also interested in throwing down on those things.
Just to add, regarding addressing this issue, if BPAC decides to go the letter route, for example, writing a letter to City Council, if anyone knows this off the top of their head, I would be curious, but I think it would really help us understand when each respective ordinance or law came into place, be it barring motor vehicles on greenways, or when these agreements with landowners within close proximity are as of. Because Nathan was mentioning the classification of e-bikes, whether based on their speed and their capabilities. This is all relatively new. It's within the last decade that this has been the case, and it's been the last 5 years that e-bikes have really exploded. It's since COVID, essentially, and a little bit before then. And so there isn't that air and noise pollution factor that generally is associated with the idea of allowing motor vehicles on greenways. And so I think emphasizing that not only is this not a producer of air and noise pollution on greenways, but if anything, it's removing air and noise pollution on our roads when we're enabling Durham residents to use e-bikes, other sort of that kind of electric motorized vehicle, or like with wheelchairs, like Mary Rose mentioned, enabling that air and noise pollution to be taken off of the roads, depending on the situation.
Yeah, I definitely think this would be probably something that we would need to go a letter route with and need to vote on, both because of its importance, but also I suspect on some points we may have a diversity of opinion among this group, so we need to discuss it.
I mean, I would be curious to hear, what the potential impact, is it going to dampen, is more e-bikes, more vehicles, bicycles, e-bikes on the greenways and the trails, will that dampen the willingness of pedestrians to use them?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the kind of actually equity-based discussion we should have. So yeah, great question. I think we need to hash this out a bit.
And another sort of equity-based concern, given that we live in a world that's even smaller, and thinking about the energy source for these batteries and the materials that go into making them. I mean, our longest running, almost most visibly intense genocide happening in places that source the materials for the batteries is currently unfolding and has been for the last 40 years. And so I'm just wondering also the source of the materials for these batteries, what people's commitments are to labor and not using slave labor to access these raw materials to go into this fascinating new, wave of the future for us. So I'm asking myself a lot of questions these days about where my things come from. I hate this phone. It's breaking before me, but I'm refusing to buy a new one until or just repair it in light of the things that are going on. And so it's just a question that I don't have an answer to, but I wonder I'm ignorant about the options we have for these kinds of things, other than asking for us to get snazzy new ways of getting around while fueling genocide.
So I've made 2 notes to myself. One is to kick off an email thread. So I am going to invite everybody to participate in that. The other is I'll probably block out a good chunk of the new business time for the August meeting for us to hopefully capture the short version of what we discuss on email ahead of time, because this is clearly something we could talk about a lot, and we need to read all this into the record, certainly before we produce any official output. So does that sound good to everybody? Great.
Marissa, can I ask to take another minute or two to kind of talk a little bit more about the disability rally that Adil mentioned in the CE report?
Yeah, I think it's in the notes, in the agenda for later on, but.
Okay, I can wait.
Yeah, I put it as a bullet, so you'll be able to talk about it.
Okay. 5 more minutes if we want. Yeah.
Go for it.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're sort of in that segment though, so I think it's okay to talk about go for it.
Okay, and because I think it ties into the bond issue. There's already a good deal of buzz in the community, people living with disabilities in Durham, about the prospects for some good investment into sidewalk pedestrian infrastructure. It's an issue that I think disparately impacts that community. So there will be a lot of discussion about voting. Board of Elections will be at both of the event locations, tabling, registering people, taking applications for ID cards, taking applications for absentee ballots. There'll be people speaking about the need for getting people with disabilities out to vote. So there's a transportation tie-in there. The two locations are running simultaneously, as Adil mentioned. It's Tuesday, the 25th from 6 p.m. to 8:30. The low visibility, quieter location will be at the Community Family Life and Rec Center at Lyon Park. And then the more energetic session will be outdoors at Port Parcel, about a quarter mile away. The address is on the website, and I think the link was shared. There will be hot dogs, hamburgers, barbecue food available. The Feed Durham is providing grocery packages for people who might be in need of them. There'll be some entertainment, again, some guest speakers, all focused on celebrating the disability rights movement, and also celebrating a Supreme Court decision that came out 25 years ago on Saturday, the 22nd, the Olmstead decision, in which the U.S. Supreme Court decided that it's a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act to house people, institutionalize people with disabilities, and that that people with disabilities have a right to live in the community, receive services in the community. And one of the things that makes that possible is having good transportation infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure. So that's being celebrated next Tuesday. And this whole thing with the bond issue is generating a lot of excitement in that community. So come on out, encourage other people to come out. Both events are going to be really exciting, and one a little bit less subdued, but equally impactful. So appreciate everyone sort of taking a look at the website, sharing it, and come on out. Thanks.
I think the other specific bullet on here is Recycle Right Durham, BPAC cyclists wanted. Who knows more about that?
That's me.
Awesome. Go for it, Hannah.
Okay, so the communications department really wants a BPAC member, someone who's a cyclist, to participate in the Recycle Right Durham video. So it's a recycling campaign that the city of Durham's doing. I guess there was a video done a while ago for it, and they're wanting to do another one, a refresh of it. And so they want a cyclist as an actor for this film. And they're hoping someone would be willing to volunteer. The filming will be mid-July time, Monday or a Wednesday. They're still confirming the exact date, but this film will be posted on the TV, on social media, and various communications channels. So they wanted a cyclist basically to, I think, bike up and then like pick up a can or something and put it in the blue recycling and like high five someone else. So yeah, so if anyone's interested, let me know. They want to know by Friday. So please do let me know. I guess maybe like right now, is anyone interested just by hearing that? Okay, 2 people. Cool. Well, please email me.
Excellent. Okay. So I think the only other bullet here was just a reminder on the July schedule. We do not have a full BPAC commission meeting in July. It sounds like DevRev is going to meet because the reviews never stop. Policy and planning is not meeting in July.
We will not be meeting. I will personally be in Europe. If everyone else wants to meet without me, they can, but nobody expressed that interest earlier, so we're not meeting.
Bring back experiences and recommendations for your next committee meeting from Europe. Is community engagement going to meet in July?
We won't meet. We'll be sussing things out. Brian doesn't know this yet, but I'll be contacting him and a few other people who have a lot of institutional memory about which projects on our list, what the status of those projects are and how they've been funded.
Awesome. So we will all be together again in August. Okay.
I just have one more thing also. Okay.
Absolutely.
I just remember as when Mary was talking about the Vision Zero resolution. So in addition to the dates, or I'm sorry, the targets which we added, which was really good. And as you mentioned, it's one thing we need to have to apply for grants and stuff. So but I think it's also important to set really tangible goals. The other thing is that it includes this new safe systems kind of model and framework. So there's in the original Vision Zero ordinance, it was sort of, there was an older kind of notion of sort of like the people needed to be educated better. And the safe system thing is like, we need to build systems that are safe for people, whether people are forgetful and or whatever, that it's safe for people. And it's not, it doesn't rely on the person themselves for being essentially like making a mistake or being a bad actor, but the systems are safe so everybody can be safe. So it's an important, it's a nuance, but it's a really important shift in the language in our resolution.
Right. I will say that I think the previous approach was like the 5 E's, which I don't remember, 3 of which were in like our EEE name. And yeah, education, engagement, something or other. And the safe systems approach is like, if anybody's seen that pyramid that Lauren Graves talked about, where it's like starting with your environment and like kind of working your way up, starting with the things that impact everybody, things that can change everything or have the most impact at once, and then fine tuning on your way up. Yeah.
Right. Any other announcements, updates, items for the good of the cause? We have our communication priorities for committees. Don't meet, except unless you're DevGov. Got Roxborough walk audit follow-up and email chain on e-bikes. Glad Brian's back. All right.
And I'm going to probably add the Durham Community Development to the queue for guest speakers, which will probably go into the next calendar year and be the next chair's one to execute on, but I'll put that in the
We'll be
rotation.
thankful for the pre-work.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you to the council for
Yes.
our lovely things that got approved in the budget. Yay to another year of free public transit. That's so great. I could not be happier. I've really enjoyed that.
Awesome. All right. So motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Second.
Seconded.
All right. All those in favor? Aye. All right. No opposed. See you next month. Stay.